and thanks for tuning in this week. One of the things that Eleanor is actually on our board of directors, and one of the things we talked about last month was maybe just highlighting some of the programs and initiatives that we have at EDA. And one of the things we've not done is highlight our training, what we currently have and where we're going. So thanks for tuning in and learning more about the various professional development opportunities that are available. And so first, I think we'll start with having introductions from our trainers. We've got 3 of our trainers on the phone here on the line. And so maybe we'll start with, why don't we start with Holly? Just kind of tell everybody a little bit about yourself, how long you've been training, and that'd be great.
Awesome, thanks Leann. Hi everybody. I do know some of you do not know me. My name is Holly Sorgen. I started as a trainer for the CED training program back in 2008. It doesn't feel like that long ago, but apparently that is the case. I primarily focus, well, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I spend 85% of my time as executive director for Community Futures Grand Prairie region in the Grand Prairie area. And the balance of my time is spent as a consultant / trainer facilitator for a number of initiatives, including the training program with EDA. I've been in the economic development field for 25 years, which again, doesn't seem like that could be right, but apparently it is. And a passion of mine is certainly around changing mindsets around economic development and what that actually is. So one of the ways to do that is through being a trainer and sharing the word and getting the language being shared. So this last little while, I have been focused primarily on the Establishing the Foundations class, which I deliver online via University of Calgary. But I do have the ability to do the in-person training as well that relates to establishing foundations and business retention and expansion, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But CED is my passion, and seeing students come through this and then seeing them flourish as economic development professionals and consultants is amazing. And seeing them at EDA conference is even better. So welcome everybody.
Thanks, Holly. How about you, Mark? Mark Morrissey.
Sure. I guess I'm the new trainer on the block. I've been doing training since about 2018, I guess, Leann. Sorry. So in my current role, I'm the Director of Economic Development for the City of Fort Saskatchewan. Prior to that, I worked in Nunavut Territory in the City of Iqaluit, where I was the Executive Director of the Nunavut Economic Developers Association, so an organization similar to EDA. While in the North, I was on council for the city. I was elected and chaired the Economic Development Committee there. I've got my ECD and my CECD from EDAC and IEDC, as well as a master's in community development. So I do primarily the elected officials training, where we kind of talk about what economic development is and hopefully kind of provide some insights on and some foundations there.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. And then we've got Natalie, aka Mrs. Santa Claus there. So Natalie Gibson, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Natalie Gibson. I have had the wonderful opportunity to do the economic development training for the Community Economic Development Program. I'm scared to say, I'd say 15 to 17 years now. I love it. Everything in my world is economic development and ties to economic development. So starting from our ECDev 101 courses, which is establishing the foundation and economic development for elected officials. I also have the opportunity to teach the business retention and expansion and business investment attraction. And I really, really enjoy the in-person. I miss the in-person courses, because the work groups and learning firsthand communities, opportunities and challenges is something I really enjoy tying into the sessions each day. All of our courses are also offered online through the University of Calgary. And just recently, we've developed an economic development for elected officials course, which is a virtual course that can be delivered to a community, or communities can partner as well. as Holly mentioned, I really like the opportunity to work with individuals through their training sessions and then later on see them doing amazing and wonderful things that they can then share with me on their new learnings. So I welcome the opportunity to continue as a trainer and meet more people.
That's awesome. And Natalie's done a lot of work over the years, just helping update content, building modules. And so just want to thank her for that. So just after this session, we will, Nancy's going to follow up. We'll have an email with any resources for you, as well as the tape recording in case you want to refer to something later. But the one thing we will include is we did a couple of years ago an infographic that shows people potential certification routes, different programs, because I kept getting questions. When I first started with EDA, I couldn't explain it. And it took me a while to understand the landscape. And so we just thought that by putting together a real simple visual, it might help people understand if I want to go this route versus this route. So the first route is IEDC. So the International Economic Development Council has the CECD. And that is a program they offer. And Mark, did you say you've got your CECD?
Yeah, I've got both.
Yeah, and so would you say, I'm just trying to think, as far as the intensity of the CECD, did you get grandfathered when they did the Canadian thing, or did you actually go? Oh, okay.
I got grandfathered. So in terms of processes, the CECD was far easier, but I did get grandfathered in.
Yeah, when they moved to Canada with their certification. But right now, I know what I've heard from IEDC, those pursuing the CECD. I mean, it is costly. It's a lot more costly and it's a lot more intensive. Obviously, at the end of the day, you've got a robust information and experience. But that is something offered through IEDC. We do offer their courses periodically. We had in the past done it every year. Some type of course here, one of their core courses. With COVID, we didn't continue but hopefully we'll start again. So if you do see in our promotions that it's an IEDC course, that is a course that puts points towards your CECD if you're interested. They are hosting the Future Forum here in June. They were supposed to do it in June 2020, but it had to be postponed. It will be in Calgary, just for those of you who are interested. And it's June, I believe, of 2023. So that you'll see more information as it gets closer. But that's a certification offered by IEDC. The other one, and unfortunately, Penny couldn't get her video or audio to work, but Penny Gardner is the CEO of Economic Development, EDA, Economic Developers Association of Canada. And she was going to just explain briefly about the ECD, but that is the Canadian certification that they provide. There's a number of, once again, I'll send the infographic out, but our courses, any of our courses are eligible for points towards the ECD. So just so you know, if you do end up taking any of our courses, then they are applicable and can go towards that certification. And if there's any, please put your questions in the chat box, because at the end, we'll definitely try to get to them. And if I can't answer them, I'm sure there's others on the call that certainly can. The other one is through EDA. So we have it was about 10 years ago, we started a certification, a management certificate program through the University of Calgary online. This was when nobody was doing online learning. And so we were really feeling that for a lot of our members, if your travel budget is lean, or your training budget, this was an option for people they didn't have to book a whole course with their community. They could take it online at their leisure. So that has been running, and Natalie and Holly will speak more specifically to those modules, but every year we have tried to run each of the courses twice. So the business investment and attraction runs twice online, the business retention and expansion, and the establishing the foundation. All three of those courses run twice every year. So you should be able to, if you're interested in taking those courses next year, I believe they should be on our website now. You can register for them. And those are, like I said, run through the University of Calgary and eligible for points towards your XD. The other thing, and I don't know, Eleanor, maybe this is a good chance to just kind of give people some a little preview of what we're working on right now, and we'll be unveiling a little more in the new year.
So this is the hot of the press. So we have a working group within the Economic Development Board and with some of our trainers to work with the University of Calgary to kind of update what we're offering. So currently we're the EDA courses are part of the Professional Management Certificate, which is essentially a 300-hour program. We are going to be shifting that to a micro-credentialing program. So where our current course sets are kind of your basics in economic development, the foundational pieces that you need in order to be successful in your career. And then how do we look at those core competencies and how do we develop them beyond the basics into, current course content that might deal more with emerging trends. So think about social economic development, which really has come out through the pandemic as key issues for communities, Indigenous relation, project management, and other skill sets that dig a little deeper into, okay, so I understand the basics. How do I now work on these other competencies and become stronger in my field? So more on that in the next early 2022, but much work is happening in that space. And we're really excited to see the shift in skill development that will bring for our profession.
Thanks, Eleanor. Yeah, it is pretty exciting because we just want to make sure to make it easy and accessible and meaningful for people who want to upgrade. The other thing is just for those of you who attend our conference every year, we always have a silent auction. Now, the purpose of the silent auction is to actually raise money for a professional development fund. So if you are a member and you want to take courses, you can apply to get some of the course tuition covered. And it always depends on how many people apply every year, but we're able to at least help support some of those tuition costs. So that's just something to think about if you are planning your professional development for next year and you think, oh, geez, I'd like to take 1 or 2 courses, might not be able to afford it all, but you can certainly approach us and apply for some support. So that's just something else we wanted to let you know. I want to now just shift a little bit. And so to tell you a little bit more, we talk BIA, BRE, ATF all the time, but I mean, for those of you who just heard that and said, I don't even know what the heck you're talking about, I want to just go through a little bit in depth of each of those courses and what you can expect if you're interested in taking them. Like the trainers have said, these are all available online, but also if your community is interested in booking, you can have an in-person day session as well, where the trainer comes out and trains, I believe it's anywhere from elected officials is usually around 10 minimum, and then up to, some of these courses can go to 20 or 30 depending. But maybe Holly, if you want to just speak to the establishing the foundation, that's really the basic one. So maybe just to explain a little bit about that particular course.
Absolutely. So thanks, Leann. So the Establishing the Foundations course is just exactly what it says. It really does establish the foundation. What I've heard back in terms of feedback from students that are engaged in this, either in person or more likely online in the last little bit, is that it allows anyone who's kind of coming in or emerging into economic development or who's been there for a while to speak the same language as other economic developers, to really understand the different key concepts as well. So it's a 5-week course. There are 4 weeks of modules. The first module is around economic development fundamentals, speaks to kind of defining community economic development and kind of the difference between community economic development and traditional economic development, which usually generates a lot of conversation in terms of that mindset shift and what is economic development and where does quality of life actually occur. We talk a lot about the key factors that drive economic development in our communities and those assets and capacity building that happens. And then we talk about things like basic economic development models. So what different communities and organizations that actually serve economic development purposes and how that's done. Then in the second week, we kind of transition and we start looking at some of those fundamental pieces and breaking them out. And the second week is really focused around strategic alliances. And as anyone who's here knows, alliances and collaboration is really the key to CED's success. So we talk about how we practice economic development, what that looks like, how we engage in it, and the role that we have as economic developers or as supporting stakeholders as well. We talk about roles and responsibilities of those who are on the team. So it might be as refined as the Economic Development Committee, what a CAO, CEO does, what the economic development professional might do, what the different organizations' mandate might be, and then who else is involved in economic development within our communities that we can be engaging to assist in checking the boxes off. And then how we engage that. So how do we actually engage our community at a grassroots level to ensure that we are, number one, serving the needs of our community and being somewhat proactive in being able to do that. And number two, spreading the wealth and spreading the work that's being done in the community to check off all those boxes. And then finding information. And that's always a really valuable point, is where on our discussion board online, all of our participants will share where they get information, how they do their research, and how they engage in that. So there's lots of opportunities to kind of really have robust conversation, either online or in person, and in a Zoom room or whatever. There are 2 Zoom sessions that we do as part of the online training to try to supplement a lot of what we learn. And those are an hour and a half each time, with all the participants being able to contribute and work and converse about some of the things they've been reading. And then we go into our other weeks. The other 2, one is around strategic planning. That's a passion of mine. So we talk a lot about how we engage our community and how we set strategic vision, goals, and mission, and things like that, and who we involve in that. And then we kind of ebb into strategic marketing and measuring economic growth, which I just finished this session and that last week with my group that we have currently. And there was a lot of conversation around marketing versus communications. How do we measure and ensure success? Because sometimes economic development can be very intangible in terms of its outcomes until things really start to come together, and how we evaluate performance. And so we had a fairly extensive conversation around that in terms of everyone's expectations and the whole continuum of planning and projects and process as well. The course itself culminates in a final assignment, if you will, when we're doing the online version, where each of the individuals actually has the opportunity to either use a scenario that's provided to them, or perhaps a scenario that's related to that, and they create a strategy. So they actually break out an action plan, and they identify goals, and they identify stakeholders and key factors as well. So it kind of culminates in taking that information and synthesizing it into something that might be actually doable at a community level. In person, if we were doing this class in person, it would be a bit more extensive in terms of the development around conversation around these specific topics, but very streamlined in the way that things are done. And I would say the feedback that we get is very much that once they do this course, they absolutely want to go and do the rest, because we just touch on those concepts of retention and expansion. We only talk a little bit about investment attraction, and now they're hungry for that stuff. So it's the perfect segue kind of into any of those, and used to be the way that we engaged our elected officials. So it's beautiful now that we have the elected officials course that really does focus on the many different things elected officials have to consider, not just around ECDEV, but their roles and responsibilities as well. So that's a bit about ETF.
That's good. Thanks, Holly. Maybe Natalie will flip to business investment attraction. Can you speak to that one?
Sure. The course is in person is 1 day, and online through the University of Calgary, it runs about 5 weeks, similar to the other courses online. And business investment attraction is always a wonderful opportunity, or a good opportunity, for individuals that are looking at the concept of how to help businesses at a local level expand into new investment, or to attract new investment from outside the community. So the course covers community investment readiness, which is a huge piece. Quite often the communities are marketing before they're investment ready. And the course ties in the concept of community investment readiness, how to move forward through the process. We also talk about the importance of competitive advantage. What is your distinctive competitive advantage as a community, your community versus another community down the road, and how it ties to what businesses need and want. We can't be everything to everybody, so what does that look like? We talk about the components that might be included in an investment attraction strategy. We identify ways to target into industries, what fits, how can a business be profitable in your community, not just the perspective of if you build it, will they come? We talk about incentives. Incentives are always a lively discussion. Each week, by the way, we have 2 or 3 questions in discussion board where participants can answer questions or query their participants in other activities they're working on. And incentives always gets everybody going, because it's not just about money or tax savings. There are a lot of other incentives. And it's important to understand the different types of incentives that might be offered. We also talk about foreign direct investment. And again, this is a topic that has really changed during the pandemic. We are seeing FDI, or foreign direct investment, come from different countries than we were seeing before the pandemic, and how that is shifting. We're seeing a high number of businesses looking to transition out of a community where foreign direct investors are looking to buy local businesses. So that is something that's really important to keep current with. And in the final week, we talk about ways to compare methods of your community business investment readiness, what are benchmarks, what's measured. Some files, especially with investment attraction, some files are open for 2 and 3 years. It's the foundational piece of business retention and expansion. You can see usually an immediate return, whereas investment attraction is a long game. It's expensive and it's a long game. So we talk about how to communicate those benchmarks to your councils, because quite often councils look at business investment attraction as a magic bullet. It generates jobs and revenue, tax revenue right away, but it actually takes a lot of targeted effort, time, money, and resources to, in fact, land some of these companies. The course is roughly 15 hours online. It has, similar to the other ones online, it has 2 live Zoom sessions that are about an hour and a half each. And I find the participants, when I look at the evaluations, their favorite is either discussion board or Zoom. And because they're able to bring up their own distinctive questions, opportunities, or challenges. So in a quick snapshot, that's a bit about BI&A online and in the classroom.
Excellent. Well, maybe we'll flip to Mark to talk about the elected official course. I know that a lot of you, well, all of you, got a new council this past October, and so the timing is good for this particular course.
Sure. So the elected officials course, it used to be a 2-day one. It's been condensed down to a day just to kind of fit within folks' schedules. We realize elected officials tend to be a fairly busy bunch. So the goals of the course is really, it kind of goes back to that economic development foundation. So what is economic development, how it fits within certain functions, from an elected official's perspective, what their role is, how you can conserve your community. It really gets into, and like Natalie said, on the investment attraction one, the incentives is always the hot topic. With elected officials training, it's always that governance versus operations. So that one tends to be a bit of a hot topic in that course itself. What is governance? At what point should an elected official kind of transcend into that operational role? Should they? Past experience, I can kind of, I try to provide my experience and all the mistakes that I made as an elected official and how that ended up blowing up in my face on multiple occasions. So it's a really good walkthrough of what not to do, from a personal perspective. So it is a really good course. It's one I wish, when I was an elected official and chairing the Economic Development Committee, it's one I wish I had taken. it really dives not too deep, but deep enough that it gives you a good foundation of what economic development is, an elected official's role, talking about strategic planning, marketing and communications, talking about who's on your team when it comes to economic development. So maybe you have a board or an advisory committee, or maybe you don't. Talks about kind of the tools that economic development professionals use and municipalities use, whether it be data, benchmarking, those types of things. We do touch upon ethics because you can kind of, it is possible to cross over an ethical line as an elected official when you look at economic development. It's something we try to avoid at all costs, but it can happen. And we also look at benchmarking and metrics, KPI, those types of things. So that's kind of the course in a nutshell. It's a very fascinating course. And again, it's, looking at my experience as an elected official, it is one I wish I had taken. I think I could have avoided a lot of pitfalls, avoided a lot of staff yelling at me at the end of the day. So it's a great course and I highly recommend it.
Natalie, do you have anything to add on that one?
I started down the road to working on the economic development manuals for exactly what Mark is talking about. I was an elected official. I spent time in the economic development portfolio and nobody could tell me how to do economic development. And the opportunity of not only having those manuals now supports elected officials, but it also really supports the staff in helping raise the level of awareness of what economic development is. Now more than ever in the last several years, in the last elections, everybody is talking about economic development and the magic word of sustainability and all of those things, but how it occurs and the strategies to achieve the sustainability, there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect I'm seeing at a municipal, provincial, and federal level. So the establishing the foundation course and the economic development for elected officials is a breath of fresh air to me that I wish I had the opportunity of taking years ago, that it would have saved me very many sleepless nights and where and how I avoided shopping while I was an elected official because we weren't achieving what the community perceived as being economic development. So that's my 2 cents on the lifesaver for both EDOs and the elected officials with that course.
Great, that's great. Holly, maybe if you can touch on business retention and expansion.
I can talk a little bit about it. I will probably defer a little bit to Natalie because she's been teaching it more recently online. But I will say and preface this saying I have a bit of a bias because business retention and expansion is by far my favorite everything because it's what I do pretty much on a day-to-day basis. But the business retention expansion program, or the course that we have, is really centered around understanding the importance of creating that really firm foundation of successful businesses within our own community to then use that as our foundation to doing investment and attraction. And I think it's always interesting when I talk to individuals about where most of the growth actually comes from. 80–90% of growth happens in a community via business retention expansion activities, where we're working with businesses that already know and love our community, that already do business there, and allowing them the opportunity to take advantage of opportunity and helping them to scale and helping them to grow their markets and access new areas as well. So that's where it really is focused about setting that cluster and making sure that our local business community that already exists is in a strong place. It allows us to also understand any red flags that we need to be aware of, be proactive. We have a conversation around business visitation, what that looks like, and communication that we have with the businesses and what we use that information for and how we gather it. We talk about the different resources that are available and at length have conversations around that. We talk about things like investment replacement programs. Very much we've been seeing in the province and around Canada, the whole buy local strategies, and then what that looks like and why it looks that way and how communities might engage in that. Sometimes we talk about downtown revitalization. So this is really very much the rubber hits the road. These are individuals that have already chosen to do business here. how do we ensure that they continue to, and how can we ensure that they are then our best ambassadors and best marketers to site selectors and other businesses to come to our regions. So I think at the end of the day, it's really about supporting entrepreneurship. And I will turn it over to Natalie to talk about what that really looks like within the confines of the online course as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Holly. The course in person or online, they mirror each other, but online we tend to speak more to the points in discussion board about raising the level of awareness of the lifetime value of a business that's already located in your community. What are the long-term benefits of that lifetime value? As Holly mentioned, the 80 to 90% of new investment comes from businesses that are already in your community. So the importance of establishing the relationships, of doing business walks, of gathering current, relevant, practical data that talks about your businesses or provides a snapshot for new policy development, for the opportunity for your elected officials to have the data that they can, not the elected officials can analyze, but you can analyze to develop programs and policies and processes that support business growth and new investment in your community. So the online course runs 5 weeks. It has 2 Zoom sessions as well, discussion board questions on how to improve the relationship with your businesses, to also encourage ways of them talking to their supply chain, their buyers and sellers that might be considering relocating a new business satellite office or a business that could be located within your community, and how to facilitate that growth so that you have a bigger team that's ambassadors of your community. Business retention and expansion is, as Holly mentioned, is my favorite course as well, or one of my favorites, simply because when we are looking at new investment, we're always looking outside our community, and our best ambassadors are in our backyard. And a big component of this program also is home-based businesses, and how many home-based businesses would in fact have the opportunity to attract not only more consumers to the community, but also new investment in their supply chain. I reside in the city of Airdrie, and about 62% of our businesses, roughly 62% are home-based businesses. And they are a vital part of our community for new investment attraction, as well as supporting local products and services. So I highly recommend this course as well. Thanks, Holly.
That's great, thank you. And then one of our last, probably the most recent course that we've added is our disaster resilience and recovery course. And really this course was initiated or started in IEDC, the International Economic Development Council, developed the course initially. We piloted it, it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and Canadianized the content. And it's actually probably a lot different than it was initially. It definitely is. And this course, up until COVID, was only run in person. So we would run it a day session, a lot of interaction. The contents really, we look at government roles and responsibilities in the whole disaster economic recovery space. We look at community recovery opportunities after a disaster, how you can make the most of it. A lot of people use the buzzword now, we build back better, but it really is kind of founded on that concept. Common challenges that communities face after disaster, crisis communications, the important role that plays, and the important role of communicating to your business community as well as residents. So that's something that's always overlooked. Looking at the phases of a disaster, types of a disaster that can happen to your community, resilience, and looking in particular how to support your business community. Because what we know in the US is that businesses, economic developers are much more integrated into the whole emergency management cycle. In Canada, it is not very common yet, and it needs to be more so. And so really, this is a tool that I see for EDOs in particular, anyone working in that space. If you want to be included in the whole emergency management, response, recovery, resilience space, this is a great way for you to sell your role, because it shows the exact role, why you have to involve EDOs and understand what the business community needs and how you can support them both before, during, and after. So I love this course. I teach it both in person and online. The online course, we originally put it on the U of C platform and just decided it may end up back there, but right now we've got it on a different platform. So it's not in our regular updates of 2 times a year. If you want to take that course online or in person, just reach out to us and we can try and accommodate a new course. But right now there's not one on the books. But Natalie, I know you train this as well, and I love it. At the online one, we do the 2 Zoom calls. They're in the evening, and it gives a lot of opportunity for people to learn from each other and to understand different elements of responding to disasters. And with COVID, there's a lot of new content, obviously. And there is an assignment in the online, not in the in-person. The online is really, and it's not hard, it really is, look at a community, which I encourage them, students to use their own, if that makes sense, and to look at what you can do before a disaster and after disaster, to have some tactics that you can implement. And it's been great because a lot of them have gone back to their organizations and said, we need to do this. Very simple things, but we need to plan for these things. And so that to me is the value when you can actually apply it immediately. Natalie, any other comments on that one?
It was for target audiences. Initially, when Leann developed the manual, we looked at target audiences being economic development practitioners, and we found a high number of those who attended were first responders, police, fire, even utility companies. And what was really interesting to me when we got those types of mixes in the room is everybody having an aha moment about the importance of there being the business voice at the table to better understand in an emergency how to be a voice for business, how, there's the first, of course, is to save life and property, but there's that component of pieces you can put in place before a disaster, not if, but when, or not when, but if a disaster happens, and how to put those pieces in place. And each one of the sessions we did, it was always interesting to me, the aha moments of those who attended who went, we never thought of inviting such and such to the table. The one was a school division, was so surprised at how they fit into the role they could play in supporting business and disaster recovery afterwards. So that's kind of was an interesting learning for me to see the different partners and how important it was for a broader understanding of the different types of roles. Isn't just emergency personnel. There's lots of other players that should be aware and engaged at different stages.
Yeah, and I think each one of these courses you can use to build capacity in your communities, because you're kind of the lone ranger out there doing your stuff, and council might not understand how they fit in. Your chambers might not understand. Your post-secondary, your emergency managers, your planners, your CAOs, like all. But once you get in a room and you talk about these concepts, they realize the linkages. They realize that, oh, as an emergency manager, if I shut down your road and I don't communicate for you for 3 months, perhaps there's a challenge with those businesses. Or maybe if we just flipped on the switch here, gave them a generator, they wouldn't lose all their inventory. There's just things like that, and they're very real things that happen, and it really builds your credibility and your place in the community as well. When you can go to your, emergency management, your EOC, whatever, and say, hey, this business needs this right now. And I know because I have data and I have a connection with them. So this is the kind of thing that we try to get at in all these courses. Because at the end of the day, so many people, including some economic developers, you can't articulate what the role is and what the profession is. And so, that's our ultimate goal. And as we continue to refine these courses and build these courses and get more people into them, that there will be more understanding what the real role of an economic developer is and how it can be a valuable role in your community, and it needs funding and resources. So, Natalie, do you want to mention just the FDI piece? I know it's not a course yet, but it's some work that that was done, and I think it's gonna appear somewhere in the near future. But
I had the opportunity to work with an individual who has been in foreign direct investment for probably 2 decades or more, and has worked all over the world. So it was very fun and exciting for me to hear about his business cases and how they all tied to a community investment readiness, again, on who you can attract to your community and how, and what countries you can deal with and what that looks like. So the new FDI guide we developed finished it in February. We're to launch it at the EDA conference in March, and guess what? That got changed. So hopefully we'll get to launch it officially at an upcoming conference. This particular manual deals with the concepts of foreign direct investment, exporting strategies, how to understand the 5 or 6 different types of investment attraction strategies that tie to foreign direct investment. And that starts again with the community investment readiness, but also ties into who site selectors are. And quite often they're commercial real estate, but sometimes the US, for example, has site selector guilds, whereas Canada does not. So quite often foreign direct investment, those investors are coming direct to the community. And as an economic development practitioner, how do you maneuver the processes, the regulatory, the permitting, the Canadian requirements, those types of things? How do you manage that? So the manual is built from the perspective of you not only understanding how to handle inbound leads, but also on how to develop value propositions for outbound leads and identifying your target markets. A big component of the manual also focuses on aftercare, which is something with foreign direct investment and investment attraction we quite often overlook, how valuable that new investor is in your community with who's in their circle, their buyers and suppliers, their value chain. And the pandemic's really, really pushing that, as you see all the cargo ships in the bays in San Fran and Los Angeles and Vancouver, and you see the impact of what's happening to the value chains. And I think it's going to be a rough winter for us. Our supply chains are really affected. And back to the FDI manual is we have the opportunity to look at the value chains and use them for investment attraction opportunities. So someday, somewhere, coming to a community near you will be our bright, shiny new FDI manual.
So I think we kind of got through what I'd hoped we could get through, just to give a snapshot of where we're at, how the various routes you can take, what courses are out there and available. Nancy, I think if anyone has questions, please put them in the chat box. Nancy's going to try and see if there's any floating out there. If not, just unmute yourself, let us know what your question is, and we'll try and answer the question.
Can I start things off? I'd like to start questions off. And Leann, you touched on this when you talked about capacity building, but I'd like to take sort of a 10,000-foot view and talk about the courses overall, connecting the dots, and why is it so important if you're in the ECDEV space, either as a practitioner or an elected official, why is it important that you even take these courses, that you work on your professional development? What is it about the profession that requires people to keep on top of this kind of knowledge?
Well, I'll rely on others to answer this question as well, because my answer may not be sufficient. One of the things that I find, this is such a bizarre field. I just got to say it because it is. You get a hodgepodge of people that are attracted to it. Some fall into economic development accidentally. Others are targeted. This is what I want to do. Some had no clue it even existed as a profession. And if we went around the room and say, how the heck did you get involved? I bet you we have different answers from everyone. Some have marketing backgrounds, some were elected officials, some, business development. It just is a range of types of people. So when you get that and you land in, hi, I'm an economic developer today, what does that mean? Like, did you take formal training? This to me is just such foundational pieces that you need. You can't be a doctor without any training. Not that we're like doctors, but we should have some kind of it is a profession. There are actual strategies, there are actual skill sets and competencies that economic developers should have. You shouldn't be able to just say, hey, I'm an economic developer, but I've never taken a course. So this is what we're trying to do, is just really give tactics and tools and resources, because a lot of times it depends what kind of organization you're in too. Sometimes we have small organizations that, I mean, and I don't say this lightly, but you're the CAO, you're the EDO, and you're the events person. Well, that's a big portfolio. In other places, like say in Edmonton or Calgary, you're highly specialized. I'm this industry development person, or I'm workforce. So, you know, you're much more specialized, but to be able to do all of those tactics really well is tough. And so the more you can do, the more you can expose yourself to these kind of strategies, I think the better off you're going to be and the more successful you're going to be. I don't know, anybody else have something they want to add to that?
You summed that up really, really well.
Yeah, really well.
I did a session at the local regional college, and they said, come and talk about economic development as a career path. And you were totally right, Leann. Most individuals are not like, I'm going to go to school and be an economic developer, because they have no idea what that is. So I think just exposure into this industry as an opportunity is huge. And then the only thing that I add to that is just the value of that network, where we are speaking that same language and validating this career path even further. I think the language will change and evolve as we change and evolve in the industry, and what we need will have changed from 10 years ago. So just keeping consistently changing, these individuals who do this training are part of that evolution.
No, absolutely.
Really, yeah.
It's,
Go ahead.
and, you know, economic development officers, or EDOs as we're called, there was a movement not long ago to rearrange the acronym to DEO for Do Everything Officer. And it's important to take courses like this because it keeps you fresh and relevant in terms of what are the trends within this sector. You know, 5 years ago, on an investment attraction perspective, the conversation around incentives was going to be your major piece. So that was the first thing an investor would ask is okay, what tax breaks can I get? What financial incentives are there for me? Now it's about the seventh question they ask. The first one being is, do I have access to skilled labor? So what investors are looking at, what exists, and I mean, the pandemic has thrown domestic markets completely on their head. So what were tried and true BRE strategies 5 years ago are just not working anymore. So we need new tools. So if you're not taking courses and you're not understanding the foundation because it keeps changing, then the tools you have may not be as effective as they once were.
And the courses as well, I think, have real world, like it's not ivory tower theory. This is like real world practical examples that you can take and implement immediately in your community.
Yeah, it's not all theory. That's the beauty. And even when we're recruiting trainers, we want people with a background in the topic that can speak to it, that have a breadth of knowledge, that because each of them can speak to it. Every class is different. They're all going to have a range of different experiences, and they know within 5 seconds if you know what you're talking about. And so, you know, it is nice to have people who can draw from a whole bunch of different scenarios and say, well, this is what happened with me. But then the format allows others to say, well, you know, this is what happened with me. So we can, you know, there's a lot of learning within the classroom as well.
And that's a really good point in terms of the content and how it's adjusted, as Mark said. Over the years, there's certain, we know what a business visitation program is. We know how it ties to business retention and expansion, but what is changing is technology-led economic development, and examples of how that ties to marketing and how that ties to the fact that we have big data gaps and how to go out and get the data so you make sure that your marketing programs are successful. So there's baseline information that's taught, so everybody gets a common level of awareness. But then the business cases and the discussion board and the roundtable discussion is customized to who's in the room. And that's one of my favorite parts is learning about what communities are working on or what worked and what didn't work, and customizing the content to their next stage. A big change, of course, not only in because of the pandemic, but just prior to, is the high level of social economic development and how it's tying to workforce and housing and transportation and immigration inclusionary strategies within a community. Those are not things even 5 years ago that came into our space very often, and they certainly are now. So being current in that is key, and being able to adjust to those types of evolving trends. And the big one right now, also wave 5, I hope doesn't occur, is tourism and events. And how are we going to start rebuilding some of these sectors? And what does that look like?
So I was laughing a little bit at you, Natalie, as you were going through yesterday's meeting, as we were going through the core competencies, where the gaps are, where the opportunities are to build on our offerings. I've taken the basic course, but I want to take it again because you had so much new content that I'm like, what? But that speaks to the ever-changing industry that we're in, and that we're learning new skill sets, and we're being catapulted into new areas. So affordable housing in Canmore, I don't know if you saw it, but we're the most expensive community to live in all of Alberta, and that impacts the labor market, and that impacts our business community heavily. And so now all of a sudden you're involved in this space that you only kind of paid attention to in the sidelines, and now you're like, oh no, we actually need to move stuff forward in this space. Otherwise our businesses are not able to expand or attract even new investment. So yeah.
Well, and I think that's a great point, and Mark, you touched on it too. These courses weren't developed in 1962 and have never changed. These courses change on a regular basis. Like, they are updated every time. We look at even the manuals; they get updated. So, even if you did take the course a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, chances are there's different content. So, maybe think about, or if you've got colleagues that said, I did that already. Maybe just think about it again, because you could be surprised.
Another point I want to add to that, and Jerry from Pratt from Clearwater County's brought this up, is I'm finding more of the planning and permitting people are coming to the table for the training to get a different perspective of what economic development is, and that they should both be in the room at the same time with the new business permits or planning or policy development and how that looks. I think it's really important that those two teams work together, and that they are a positive force in keeping existing business and attracting new business. So in some cases, I'm having junior and senior staff coming to the table for training sessions on better understanding what economic development is and how it ties to their profession, which we didn't see that very often. And in some communities, there's animosity between the two departments even, and which is really unfortunate for the business community. I've been in this industry 25, 30 years almost, and I still have trouble explaining it to my family what I do for a job. And when you have different departments that try to explain how they should work together, I think the manuals and the training sessions help give examples of positive roles that they can play to significantly help business.
No, that's an excellent point. And just to highlight it, we had a vacancy in our department just as the pandemic was beginning. One of our team moved over to St. Albert to take a management role. So when we backfilled that position, we actually hired one of our planners into that role, and she has been a phenomenal fit. Not only has it given her the perspective of what we do, but it's also given us the perspective of the planning department, and now she has served as a bridge between the two.
Excellent.
So now that, we didn't learn to speak planning, they didn't learn to speak economic development, we formed a new language where we're all on the same page, and the benefits we've seen are already we've turned around major complex industrial permits in 8 weeks because we're all speaking the same language now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's actually your point there. The one thing we always start with in the manuals is the glossary of terms, because economic development does have its own language. So
that's the home of the acronym.
Nancy, any other questions that you see? Or no?
I don't see any other
Okay.
questions. But before we wrap up, I just want to remind everybody that the full course list and times are on our website. So please refer to our website, register for these courses, the Economic Development for Elected Officials course, gather your team. I mean, we've just had an election. Gather your team, take this course. It is fantastic, as we know. So please refer to our website, all the information is there.
Yeah, and thank you, Natalie, Holly, Mark, for your ongoing support of the program and training, because it's critical. And yeah, we will be in touch in the new year with more details about, as we unveil more details around the micro-credentialing. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out the link. Feel free to share with anyone who you think would value from this topic, and as well as the infographic, so you can kind of see how this all fits together. So thank you. And this is our last webinar before the new year. So wishing you guys all a healthy and happy, safe new year. And we'll see all of you in the new year, and hopefully at the conference in person.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, sorry, it's Shauna here, is building on Mark's comment is, maybe there is a planning economic development course offering that's there. So I did my master's in planning, and I had and I did at University of Guelph, and they were very integrated. We had to take a landscape architecture course. We had to take an economic development course, because you understood the whole, how it all fit together. And I decided before I had graduated that I wanted to be an economic developer after that one course. And I didn't want to be a planner, but my planning knowledge has really helped me in economic development. And I've so often come across municipalities when I was with the government and now that see their role is blocking development. So I'm just wondering if there's something there. I think.
Well,
Yeah.
we have done, and Eleanor, a kind of nodding your head too. We're looking at all of those core competencies right now,
Yeah.
as far as where EDA takes the lead, where we partner with someone who is an expert in that topic, but we want an economic development lens on it. And so all of that works. So you shouldn't be surprised if that element, I mean, it is in throughout, kind of dotted throughout our courses right now, but that I believe is an element that we've addressed or looking at in that whole matrix.
Yeah, we might want to look at, having a session at the, the Alberta, the planning conference here, having a session there, if we haven't before. So just a suggestion.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're 1 minute over. I hate to go over, because everyone's got stuff to do. So thanks again for your time, and hope to see you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Take care.